Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I'm your captain and host, Emcee Frodus, alongside the best bridge crew this side of a positronic brain in cascade failure.
Oh.
What? Too soon?
Oh, come on. We're not even there yet.
Vice Admiral Eric is here and thinks Data made the right choice telling Lal to choose her sex and appearance.
Damn straight.
Hawk is here, and honestly, I can't remember what your current rank is.
I know. I've been going back over files, and I can't seem to find it. And the last update I have is that I'm still captain.
You're rankless.
Yeah. Cowboy captain is the next rank up.
Ooh.
Nice.
But yeah, whatever your rank is, you think there's nothing wrong with an android being a cocktail waitress. So how are we doing?
Doing good. So,
I'm okay.
I mean, we're buried in snow. That's all we can talk about these days.
We're gonna get more snow this weekend.
Yes, we are. Another 5 to 15.
I saw that it's gonna be 25 to 30, more likely.
Oh,
Unsurprisingly, it is the Canadian contingent tonight, and that's why we're talking about lots of weather.
yeah, because we're housebound, and we're just looking for something to do.
Yeah. Well, we do have something to do because this week it is our first in our series of favorite episodes. And we're talking about my personal choice, and that is The Next Generation's The Offspring. We're going to look at this classic episode, which we were just discussing off mic, turns 35 this year, where Data builds himself a child. But first, Hawk, can we thank our patrons at the Ready Room level and above?
Absolutely. So thank you once again to Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Mariah Gossett, Tallulah, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Joe Saporito, Noe Santos, Kang Wee, Takako Nagumo, Fernanda Nogales, SMK, Colin Davidson, Shatterhand 2049, Jesco, Michael Graham, Emily and Travis, Gildara, Maggie Light, Wayne Ritz, Scone of Arc, Sean, Jay Howard, Mahalani Uchiyama, Matt Harker, Joshua Lewis, Davey Willett, Tara Pollen, Slope 74, Rude Parakeet, Joshua Miller, Aaron W., Carl Langoli, Michael Kwan, Caitlin, Elizabeth Dean, Jim McMahon, Sedano 317, Puka Hair, Three Fries Short, Cat Tip, Tripping the Reed Alert over a Pineapple, Sean Manning, Asher CBF, Chris Waterman, RHCB, Martin Simpson, Norman Buckwald, David Prime Hildebrand, Taryn J. Robinson, Rod Grenier, Eric the Red, Trouble, Jamie Roberts, Honeyberry, Paul Taylor Pitt, and Brett Jones, Michelle P., Margin Walker 82, Melissa Bartell, and Jesse Robbins. Thank you so much. You want to give it to our Badmirals?
And as always, a big thanks to our Badmirals, our EPs, Simon Stager, Chris Waterman, Tara Poland, Brett Jones, Dana, and Matt Harker. You guys keep the lights on around here, and we appreciate it every episode.
It has been a few episodes since I've been here because there's a few names at the end I just didn't recognize at all. That's awesome.
All right, so we're going to get into some news. So we're finally going to be recording our Lower Decks Warp Your Own Way bonus pod. So now would be a very good time to reread that comic and then reread that comic and then reread that comic because it is a multiple choice, choose your own adventure. But look out for that bonus pod. Merch. Eric and I have both been busy making some very cool designs, and we're getting closer and closer to getting a store up. We'll be announcing that to everyone as soon as that goes live, but we're very, very excited for it. So while I've got the wheel here, I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for watching the This Day in Trek History series we've been doing. If you found your way here from those, because we've gotten some subscribers from those, we're so glad to have you. I've been the one putting those together, and it's been so much fun going through all of the Star Trek moments that happen every single day. But we've got some important news, and that is Trek Talks. It has finally been rescheduled. It was delayed due to the wildfires, but it will now be held April 5th, starting at 9:45 Pacific and 12:45 Eastern. This is a live stream telethon hosted by John Billingsley and Bonnie Gordon to benefit the Hollywood Food Coalition. There will be a multitude of Trek guests. You can already donate by going to trektalks.net. So please, please, please check that out. Is there any other news, guys?
I think that's everything.
Okay, so then we'll get into the Strange New Loop. So Thank you for doing that.
Nice.
I don't have a soundboard. You are my soundboard. So in lieu of a proper Strange New Loop, I thought it might be fun for you guys and for everyone in the chat to try to figure out why this was my choice for my favorite Trek episode. Once you're done guessing, then I'll actually tell you why I chose it.
Well, it's very like progressive for its time. Like we had a character that got to that. Well, there was a parent who was fine with their child, choosing their gender, even if there wasn't a gender. There's some weird things at that moment that 30 years later you're like, oh, that's a weird way to put it, but it was even now. Like I feel like if this was on TV now, people would still give it shit. Like that's what's so ridiculous about it.
It's weird. It's weird that it could slip kind of between the cracks back then, because there wasn't a big uproar about it. Like, if it was released now, obviously there would be like some huge uproar in that. This one, in that it just slipped it in with, without raising a big fuss and that, but like it still resonates today watching it.
Like
more so today.
Watching Data also like fend for his child. And I mean, Picard, even though he was against it at first, he like fought for his crew. It's all like, it's solid. It's a solid episode.
That, and it's like I think it's been noted that Data is very appealing to people in that who are neurodivergent. And in this, we get to see like what it must be like with a child who's neurodivergent and the way parents approach their rearing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, all of that stuff is very much stuff that makes me like it. It's not the reason why I chose it, though, but seriously agree with every single
can I
bit
have one more
that.
guess? Is it because Law's played by Lizzie McGuire's mom?
I have never seen an episode of Lizzie McGuire in my life.
My oldest kid is going through all these random like Disney things. So when I saw her, I was like, this lady, this mom looks really familiar. And I looked it up.
Wow.
I was like, whoa, okay. I'm pretty sure it's one of those old Disney shows. And I'm like, okay, random.
So the reason why I chose this episode, it was very hard for me to choose what episode I was actually going to do because there are so many Star Trek episodes that I feel are my favorite. I am terrible at making decisions about this kind of thing. But when it came, I think it was actually the last one on our group to actually name an episode. So this was the one that kind of stuck in my mind, and I was very hesitant to do it because I knew what episode Hawk was going to pick, and I was like, "Oh my god, are those two episodes like too similar to each other?" But this was the one.
Right?
This was the one I kept on coming back to, and I think it's nostalgia. I watched TNG when I was growing up, and my mom's favorite character was Data. And so I remember watching this episode very clearly with her. Mm-hmm. And this episode that deals with a parent and child together, watching it with my mom who loved Data, that is just embedded itself in my heart. So, and we haven't talked about this episode before, and a lot of the episodes I really love are ones that we've already talked about. So I liked being able to dig through the archives. That's probably not a very exciting answer.
No, it's a good one.
That's a perfect answer. That's like, it's exactly why we're here in that, right? Because, every one of us in that, has that particular series and those big emotional connections, especially with family. Yeah.
Like if I think about Quantum Leap, I think about me and my parents pulling out our pull-out couch in our basement, like when I lived in Niagara Falls, and just gathering on Sundays and just pulling out the blankets and watching it there. Like those are my warm and fuzzy moments. Like I love that. I love
those core memories.
Yeah.
Plus, it's unusual because I was so sure I'd be the only one picking a TNG episode.
I was so close. I almost did because of you. You were you were after me when you picked, and I was like, I was gonna pick the episode that's actually the one right before this one, and I was like, oh, Hawk might pick that. I'm just gonna go straight to DS9 because I love DS9 too. So.
Yeah. Oh, what was the one before it?
Yesterday's Enterprise.
Oh my God. Yes. That's a really good one. Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm glad we're talking about this episode. Mm-hmm. It always stood out to me, like in the series.
So yes, we were talking about the Offspring. Our order tonight is Eric, Hawk, then myself. So we're not going to be going scene by scene through this. I've kind of just gone a little fast and loose with this. Just go with it. To start with, I want to talk about the premise of this episode. This is not the first episode to do the parent for an episode concept. There was the massively problematic The Child in season 2. That episode had a lot of focus on the mystery of what Ian was. The Offspring just gets to skip over all of that because it's very straightforward. Data builds a child. So we get to go right into parenting and fast forward, but it's not unnatural from the perspective of the characters. We could just focus on the essence of this is what it's like to be a parent. How effective was this concept done? Eric, I'm especially interested in your opinion, seeing as you're the only one of us who has kids.
Hey, it's funny because I remember seeing this episode growing up. Like I used to watch this with my dad. I used to watch TNG with my dad. And so I remember fondly liking the episode, and then watching it today, or watching it yesterday and today, because I watched it with my youngest. I watched it with Tala, and it's such a different experience watching it as a parent, or at least watching it older now. And it's so endearing to see this android, like watching Data, like fend for his child, right? Like he was there always for her. He's this character that, doesn't really have emotions. So at the end, when Lol's like, I'll feel this for both of us, I was just sitting there like, why am I crying at this TNG episode? Like I did not expect it, because you think about it through your lens of, watching it as a child, and you're like, oh, this is a good episode. Oh, it's nice that he cares for his child. And then me being a parent being like, oh my God, I love this so much. And then there are parts like when Lol gets frightened and you see, Data rush off, and then Troy's talking about how she was scared, and Data had this place for her to come back to whenever there was something wrong. And that's something like you have as a parent, like you always want them to feel safe in a spot. I specifically remember a memory of Kateri being like 2 or 3, and we had been watching The Land Before Time because I thought that was such a good idea at that time. I remember watching The Land Before Time when I was young, and it was a little scary, but she woke up in the middle of the night and she came over to me and she's like, Papa, I'm scared. Can I lie down on you? So she went on me, and then she started falling asleep, and she said, Papa, you protect me? And I was like, of course. It's like, you protect me from dinosaurs? I'm like, oh yes, of course, I'll protect you always. She's like, you protect me always? I'm like, yeah, of course I will. And then I was just like, oh my God, don't cry, your child. And she fell asleep in my arms. Like, but that's that feeling. Like you see that feeling, even though Data can't emote it and he doesn't have the processing to do it, or he doesn't have the ability, you can see that it's there, and it doesn't have to like come out in full emotions. Like it's such a good way to show parenting, especially when you get that polar opposite of the Admiral there, right? He seems like such a hard parent, the parent that was never there. And he's like, he even says really early on that you have to let your kid go at some point. But like, I'm not at that point. Like, I don't know, like, would I ever just let them go? I feel like I'd always be there for them. And my parents are like that with me. Like, they always check in on me, and I check on them. Like, that's just the relationship we have. So seeing that was like, yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
As far as it's shocking how good a father Data is, just like right off the bat. Because, I guess, not being a parent myself in that, I think, probably the greatest joy parents have is experiencing everything through their kids' eyes for the very first time. And that's what Data gets to do with his daughter right off the bat. From the very start, teaching her everything and that, teach her the difference between a flower and a painting and that, and watching as she is smelled for the first time. We get all those, we read Data a lot more than I think we even read Lol's expression, to all the events that she's learning about in this. I know my eyes are always watching Data and that, and the way his, the slight little face cues and everything and that as he's teaching her, and he's a really good teacher. Like he even mentions about how, the difference between knowledge and experience to her, and I found like him just like an amazing parent for the first time out, and you got to give credit to the rest of the crew in that, because he does reach out to them. The one odd thing about this episode is the lack of Geordi in it.
That is true, because Data and Geordi are married, so you'd think that he would have an interest in Lal.
Like, I know he kept Lal a secret throughout her entire construction and that, but like, it seems like such a big event not to have Geordi there, Yeah,
he's only there in like the very beginning. Like, he's introduced to Lal and then disappears for the entire episode.
He's not there at the end, is he?
No. Wait, was he even there at the beginning? I thought that was Wesley.
He was. It was Wesley Crusher. No, not Wesley Crusher. Wesley Troy, and then Geordi.
Yeah.
Okay. God. But yeah, it's an incredible episode about what it is to be a parent. Yeah, that's really all I got to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, like I already said in the introduction to this, that it's so refreshing to have Data, this being his natural version of procreation, like literally creating life in a laboratory. So you get to skip over all of that stuff that happens in other episodes where it's like, I suddenly have a child, where people are like freaking out about it. This is completely normal for Data, and it's just like a strict, I am going to raise this kid, and it's so pure and beautiful the way he does it. And I actually think this might be the first episode I personally really felt like Data has emotions. He just does not realize he has emotions, because there's just so many things that he does with Lal that he would not have done if he did not care for her. In particular, the very ending of this episode, which just, that makes me cry for probably like the third time when I watch this episode. But yeah, no, it's I think a really good version of this concept. Probably the best version of this whole trope.
I mean, look at that picture behind Hawk. Tell me that's not someone who loves his daughter, right?
Exactly.
Like, look at that. Look at him.
But that's always been the running theme with Data, is that he says he has no emotions but his actions always speak louder than his social cues, right?
Yeah, I mean, Troy even says it in this episode that Data says that he can guide her, but he can't love her, and Troy's that's like, right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's not true.
She says, "You've never been a parent, right?" I'm like,
that's in reference to Picard.
Oh yeah, it was
Picard's
Picard,
just like, what kind of child can like lift 5 tons or whatever?
And it's not even like Data just built her in that. I mean, his contribution, like, from himself, was his positronic brain in that. There's no, Starfleet, no one has access to that except for him, and that in that way, it's his seed that he, that Lal springs from. And yeah, this episode is so great about driving home that point. It's kind of, like I said, we mentioned before how it really closely connects to Measure of a Man, in that which
we will be talking about a little bit more later.
Yeah, and it goes that extra step further in dealing with parental rights, especially when the government or like a CPS kind of steps in.
So aside from Data, the only one of our main characters who gets significant development, because as we mentioned, Geordi disappears. I don't think Worf has any lines in this.
None.
But the only person who gets significant development is Picard. But he actually has some really great development in this. He goes from shocked and honestly kind of horrified. But then he goes all of the way to risking his own commission in order to protect Data and Lal. So how well do we think this journey of Picard's was shown?
I mean, I think Worf isn't in this episode because he just discovered prune juice the episode before, so that's probably why he's out this whole episode. For Picard, like I was really surprised. I don't remember him being so against it at the beginning of this episode. So seeing that and seeing him be so aghast of it, it was so strange. Like I do love that Data's like, but I don't recall you ever having an issue with anyone else procreating on the ship. And I was like, good point. But seeing him like sit there and defend Data by the like going through that motion at the end and realizing that this person, this being, Lol, is a sentient person. So they have rights. And as we're going to talk about later with Measure of the Man, obviously like that deserves their own, like they deserve their own, you know, what am I trying to say? They deserve their right to be there with their parent or be there on that ship and, you know, choose their life. So I love that Picard is willing to fight for any of his crew, even this person that he didn't think was a person at first. So I thought that was really, it showed how good of a captain, good of a person he is, even though he was, you know, so against it at first.
Sure. If in a way it's a split episode, right? It's Data, you know, and his story, and that it's not just a Data episode. It's also sort of a Picard episode. I love his little conversation with Data. He also gave us a fantastic meme. You know,
the double face bomb. Yeah,
the
that
double
comes from
face
this
bomb.
episode
Because Data was so good at shooting down every one of his arguments. You know, it's not like, I don't think Picard was angry about it, you know, even though we seem very angry about it. It's just that he's trying to get Data to understand, you know, get out of this naivety. It's not just a child that he's, you know, that he has created. It's, you know, it's a technological marvel even their top guys haven't been able to reproduce. Nobody knows how to reproduce a Soong's positronic brain, right? And the Data did this entirely in secret. He did it all by code. He keeps establishing that with everybody, and that I am following all guidelines and procedures of Starfleet. But Data is so enamored with like creating a child, he doesn't understand the ramifications of it going down the line. And we know what the ramifications of it are. You know, it's all spelled out in Measure of a Man. You know, and as you know, as it mentioned before, and that Picard even mentions this episode, he helped establish those rights for Data and like what will be the future of his ilk. But there's still a lot of people in Starfleet who don't recognize it. This is Admiral Hoftel. He finds out about it. Like, he recognizes Data's sentience, but he still doesn't recognize their rights.
Colin actually has a great point in the chat. Colin says, hence my never-ending anger at Starfleet treating all of this as a project and not a sentient entity.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they see it as.
And I think that we actually get some of this with Picard. And I love Picard, but in some ways he is like an aloy for, you know, an LGBTQ plus person who is straight, not actually a part of the community, who's super, super supportive. But then every once in a while, like, something will bleed through, like that hardwired programming that's in the back of their head, and they don't even realize they're doing it. And very much that's kind of what's coming out with Picard in this episode, because he's all for the rights of androids, but he's more for the rights of androids when it's Data, because Data's his friend and he's worked on his ship for a long time. And then this new android has come in and he just doesn't know how to deal with it. And so he's very aggressive about it, and he's not very nice. Like, it's not until like the middle of the episode that he stops referring to Lal as it. And definitely, like, Picard is willing to go to the mat by the end of the episode, but it was very much this journey of, oh, there's some preconceived notions that I need to leave behind. Of course, I don't know if Picard totally learned his lesson, because then in the first season of Picard, we do have him have the line, Data always wanted a daughter, and all I can think of, he had a daughter, you insensitive prick.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to talk about Lal, because Lal is the offspring. In rewatching this, I was surprised by how much of the episode is actually from Lal's point of view. It's something that differentiates it again from the child, where we didn't get to spend much time with Ian as an individual. But we get a very clear idea of who Lal is. She gets a personality. I don't think any of this could have been done without the performance of Hallie Todd. She managed to evoke the idea of Data, but it wasn't a parody. Mm-hmm. And she had her own spin. So our thoughts on Lal and Hallie Todd.
I thought Hallie Todd did an amazing job, because she was like Data, but just like a little bit more evolved. Like you can see the emotions coming through as it progressed. Like you can see the evolution of what Data eventually becomes through the movies, which is crazy. And he had to get that emotion chip to actually deal with the emotions. So seeing her start to develop emotions and then like feeling it was crazy. I thought Lal was such a fascinating character. And seeing, it's funny being a parent and seeing this robot that's definitely not a 3 to 6 year old, but starting off like you can totally see them like see the world, like that bright eyed world where you're just like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And you're like, yeah, you're trying to tell them everything, and you're just excited to see them learn. And she had that excitement. I don't know if we talk about this later. There was this one moment where before Lal picks their form, they're in the hallways and they're like female, and Troy's like yeah and male, huh? And then I'm gender neutered. I was like, oh, I don't like that. Like there's some weird things.
I was written in 1989.
Yeah, and then she's like, I'm not complete. And I felt there, I was like, oh, that's rough to feel that. To say that. But yeah, at the time you're like sitting there like, okay, they just want this person to be a something later, right? They want them to have that humanoid feature so that you can have that daughter thing, right? But yeah, I thought that was just strange. But overall, like her journey was so good, and the acting was so well done. Especially like when she starts getting scared. Like when I was talking about that story about Kateri being scared, that's what it felt like. It felt like when she got scared, and then when she starts like hitting her chest, and she's like inside, and then it's like it's still robotic, but you can see the feeling trying to come out. I was like, it was heartbreaking as a parent. I'm sure as a normal person, as like a regular person.
As somebody who has panic attacks, it hurts to watch that scene, because Hallie Todd knows, like, I don't know if it's Hallie Todd or if it was Jonathan Frakes, but somebody knows what it's like to have panic attacks. And it's like, you need to do this. And it's chilling because I do that when I'm having panic attacks.
And sort of she's having this panic attack, and then she sort of like walks off like in a daze, and you're sitting here like, I just wanted to run in there and like give her a hug. Like it was so well done. And to offset that really like emotional part, to her comedic timing of her kissing of Riker, like it was just the gamut of everything. Like she was so good in this episode.
No, I totally agree. Hallie Todd just nails this. It's weird for any actor to have to, play in a robotic fashion, right? It's like to kind of suppress all natural emotions or instincts of how to carry a scene in that and deliver like flat, not just vocally in that, but facially too. And she does perfectly. It's the bit where she and Data smell the flower for the first time. And you can actually see Lol kind of put, Lol's programming kind of goes a little wild when she's like, smell. She's never experienced that before. It was amazing that she keeps it all under constraint. But yeah, it's the scene where she feels emotion for the first time. It really, really gets you. That like an android trying to process a feeling of emotion, and that, and it's such a foreign concept that it makes her physically want to attack herself. Almost like she's trying to physically get it out of her. In that, I love that. God, I don't know what else to say.
You've said quite a bit. I love Hallie Todd in this. I think she is fantastic. Of course, this episode broke my heart anyways, but I was really upset that we only got her for this one episode, because I think that some wonderful stuff could have been done with Lol and with her. And actually, while I was writing this outline, I found out that there was very serious talk about having Lol come back in season 5. They were going to have Lore steal Lol's, deactivated form and bring her back. And I'm like, oh, that would have been very interesting and very possibly bad, because look what happened when they brought Lore back at that time and did bring back another one-shot character that turned out not too good. But that would have, it's always that what could have been. So I think she's fantastic. I love the moment this is such a sad moment, and this is something that I really highly identify with. The standing in the back of the classroom when all of the kids are sitting together. I was so angry at that teacher who's just like, she doesn't fit in. All of the other kids make fun of her. And I was like, well, dude, then it's your job as a teacher to make her fit in. She's been there for one day. It's not like Lol was around for quite a long time. She was there for a very short amount of time, and she spends a lot of it at 10 Forward. So I think she was only there for a day or two. Why is this teacher immediately giving up on Lol? Because it's your job as a teacher to get these kids to socialize, and especially at a starship, get them to socialize with other life forms. You're on the biggest starship in the galaxy. I'm still shocked that there was no Andorians on this ship, and that the only time we ever see Andorians in this series is in the holodeck when Lol is picking them out. But presumably there's a lot of aliens on the Enterprise, and you should get these kids used to interacting with them. So yes, you might have somebody who is socially like a 5-year-old who is actually looks like a 20-something woman. You got to get them used to that. Yeah. This is Starfleet.
It's sad because I hear from other parents that have children with learning disabilities, and there are teachers that just straight up give up on them. And it's heartbreaking to hear. They'll be well, their EAs are going to deal with that. I'm like, no, you have to work as a team to do this, right? That child should not feel alone. It's terrible to see that in the 80s, but it's worse to know that it's still happening.
Yeah.
Sorry for bringing that down.
No, it's okay, because
that's the way this episode works, because it brings up so many issues about how children with special needs are treated. It's and essentially creates a whole conflict in this episode now regarding who is best equipped to raise Lol. And so it's moments like this were really important in establishing that part of the story.
Perfect timing, because we're actually getting into this episode having my least favorite admiral in all of Star Trek, and that's Vice Admiral Haftel. What makes me hate Haftel is that he's not a badmiral, because the badmiral has a very specific definition. It's someone who is corrupted and working outside of Starfleet. That's not what Haftel is. He is absolutely working with Starfleet. He has Starfleet's complete blessing. He's just the worst. He's awful. So where do you guys think Haftel rates on the Badmiral scale?
I don't think he's a bad admiral, like you said. But he is one of those fucking terrible parents that think that they're better than every other parent and that they have to tell parents what they have to do. And I fucking hate parents that are like that. They are just the worst. So whenever I heard him talk, that's what I heard. It's just him being like, no, Data can't do this because this is blah, blah, blah. This is the way you have to do things. And you're like, it frustrates me. And especially in this political state that we're in right now, seeing that happen Southern to us, like on a way higher scale is very, very frustrating. And I know a lot of our listeners are affected by this, and that's fucking shitty. The only thing that sort of pops him up at the end is at the end when he sees how far Data would go for his child, right? And that's the sad thing, is because that's the only thing that'll change someone's mind that's like that, is to see it and to see it, like, for them to go through it. Like, if it doesn't affect them, they don't care. They think they're the person that's in the right, and I fucking hate that. Yeah.
Hawk.
I know he seems like like one of those typical characters. It's like, he's kind of the Bruce Maddox for this episode. It's like he's the outsider who comes in, and he doesn't know Data like the way the rest of the crew does. It's the same thing that Maddox went through. With Haftel, he's there on a mission, basically, and to recover, potentially another Soong type android. This is what they were trying to do before, and even though he acknowledges the sentience and that, he comes in, he had a mission in mind. He needed to get Lal back to Starfleet. And it's interesting watching this, like 35 years later, after Picard, after we know what happened at Utopia Planitia. Starfleet was always trying to get a hold of this technology in one form or another. And you got to give it to Nicholas Coster in that he played. You hate him. He's a badmiral in that kind of quotation mark sense, but at the same time, it's his performance in that he came in with an agenda. He didn't want his mind changed. No matter what Picard, no matter what Data had said, and that he was going to be leaving there with Lal, no matter what. But you're right.
The performance is really great, because we do have him throughout the entire episode. He's just being like this terrible, gruff, Data can't do this. But then at the very end, when Lal is about to die, and he's like, his hands never stopped moving. Yes. And there's this softness in how he delivers the line. And it's this sad kind of realization that, oh shit, all of this is my fault. And because he does say it's like one misstep and we could lose this android. He made the misstep. Yeah. And he not only lost this android, but he lost Data, his daughter, and it's absolutely affected him. And I think we never see this admiral again, but I think it affected him so badly that he resigned from Starfleet.
It feels like it, doesn't it? It's that moment, biblically, it's like when Saul falls up, the one that falls off the ass. But he has that moment of realization. Maddox had that same thing. That moment, it's when people spend time with Data, and that we've talked about Data, thinking he has no emotions, but all of his actions, always display, what the actions he takes to prevent Lal's death obviously show, he has emotions, and it's freaky for outsiders to see. But once they see it, they never refer to Data as it ever again.
So we keep on mentioning Bruce Maddox and Measure of a Man. So it's, I think, really interesting that both Hawk and myself wanted to do this episode and Measure of a Man, because they're really companion pieces to one another. So I don't think it's unbelievable that Haftel should do all of this, even after everything that was decided in Measure of the Man. But I would like to talk about the frustration of the lack of autonomy for both Data and Law in this episode, even after their rights were codified.
I mean, it's so rooted in what we live in even now as today. Like, there are still people who have rights in their countries, not mentioning any Southern of us, but they're not treated as people, right? Like, you can go through all of these fights for rights, but if there are people that still treat you as items or as things instead of as human beings or as people, like, it doesn't matter that they have these rights because they'll never treat them that way. And that's what's frustrating about this, is that you see that, like, as a person of color, it's hard for me to go places because there are times when I feel like, you know, they won't see me as a person. Like, especially if I'm driving in southern states. Like, I'm sorry for people that are down that way, but that's how I feel. It's like, it's scary for me to drive anywhere in the southern states. And I definitely won't be doing it in the next 4 years. So it's frustrating, but it definitely makes sense. And I know that Gene Roddenberry had this idea of this, like, this perfect society later, but these are prejudices that people have, and it feels, it doesn't feel right, but it feels real that they would still have these types of people.
Yeah. No, I agree. You know, and as far as Gene's vision and that, Gene's vision was still like, you know, us 200 years from now and that, you know, Gene also knew that we were still going to have to go through some rough times, you know, and we'd see that in every day. One of the greatest issues with this show is parental rights, you know, and when the state comes in and demands to take a child, and that's why I mentioned CPS services and that, but like, anytime like a government agency comes in and that and makes a judgment call about like how parents are raising their children and that, you know, it's like, you know, I understand, like, you know, they're, you know, sometimes they're in bad circumstances, but in some cases, a government agency can come in and make very kind of abject decisions and that without considering all the circumstances. Mm-hmm. And I think this episode kind of really explored that beautifully. When Haftel comes in because he doesn't think that the Enterprise is a proper environment for a law to be able to grow and in the right, I say the right way, but I don't know how to phrase that properly.
It's funny because when he's at the bar observing Lal, he's like, this android could do 60 trillion computations a second or something like that. And like,
you have her working as a cocktail waitress,
and that's not why she's there. She's there to observe, you know, humans and you know, learn from them. And
he's only he's only focusing on the wrong aspect of it, right?
Because he's only trying to find things that will bolster his argument, because he came in there, he's like, I am going to take this android and I just need to find reasons why this is no good. It's like, what, you have her working as a cocktail waitress? It's not like this person that she's working for is thousands of years old and is one of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, who is the only person that Q is scared of. We don't like that Lal is doing this, and
he's super dismissive of Guinan. He really is.
Yeah,
it's awful.
And I feel like Haftel like recognizes that Measure of a Man happened, but he doesn't seem to really understand it because, well, first of all, like, Lal can't be Starfleet property, like even less so than Data, because Lal's not a member of Starfleet. Like, she presumably is a Federation citizen because Data is a Federation citizen, and I don't know.
I wonder if he thinks of her as Starfleet property because she was built on a spaceship, so that, you know, the parts used were like that's the only thing
from our replicator.
Yeah, they came from our stuff, so that they're ours. Like, it's that type of
I know
thinking,
it's like reducing law down to patent law. You know, it's like we see people arguing about that nowadays and that, but at the same time, it's still viewing her mainly as a technological marvel and not as a sentient being.
We either live in a post-scarcity society or we don't. Like, and it's so ridiculous. Like, lol. They've established that androids are living beings. And I think this is something that I actually had considered at one point pitching doing an episode about how badly AI is treated in Starfleet, because they never learn their lessons. Like, Measure of a Man is a fantastic episode, and we will be talking more about that in, I believe, 2-3 weeks. But they never learn their lesson from that, because that same shit comes up with the Doctor in Voyager. And then when we see it in Picard, all of these androids that are turned into mindless automatons. And I mean, granted, they're not given the same higher positronic brain functions that Data has, but that's basically they've lobotomized these androids. Yeah. And I feel like Data was an exception for everybody on Starfleet. It's like, oh yes, Data's okay. Data can stay on the Enterprise and do what he wants because Data's good there. But fuck Lal, she's only been around for like 2 weeks, but she can't learn anything from her dad. It's not like this is the biggest spaceship, the flagship, that she can actually learn things by visiting strange new worlds. It's just ridiculous. But it does not surprise me in the least. I have no faith in Starfleet. I know. This is a preview of our Measure of a Man episode.
It's basically like Lal is a super talented child and that, and he wanted to send her off to advanced academy classes and that, without realizing that Lal at this stage was still emotionally, I'm going to use the word emotionally with Lal, and that at the stage of a child, probably like a 4-year-old at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, as soon as Lal said, I don't want to leave, what makes sense is for me to learn everything here, and then maybe I'll go to the starbase.
Yeah.
Done. If you've asked a sentient being where they want to be, you cannot force them to go elsewhere, especially when they're not a part of your quasi-militaristic science group. And
when the Admiral was telling Data, oh, it'd be better if you told her that this was your idea, I was like, you're going down. Yep.
Oh, could you imagine how she would have absolutely lost it if that had happened?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Before we get to that, we do have a more fun thing to talk about, because I did want to talk about this scene. This is more of our miscellaneous category, but I wanted to talk about the scene with Guinan in 10 Forward, where she's explaining romance and sexuality to Lal. This is one of my favorite Guinan scenes in the whole series. I believe it's top 5. It's one of the great ones to me because Guinan's always got these great speeches. You think Yesterday's Enterprise or Measure of a Man or I, Borg. But the thing is with all of those are very serious. And this one is one of the lightest. So I think the only one that really compares to this is when Guinan and Riker are explaining flirting to Wesley. And so this is like a Guinan that we don't really get to see very much. And Whoopi Goldberg's incredibly funny. So I really appreciate that. I do have to say big points to Whoopi Goldberg for changing the line, when a man loves a woman, to when two people are in love. Unfortunately, she was not able to convince them to actually have a same-sex couple in the background of the scene as she wanted. She wanted to have...
Did she really try?
She wanted to have two couples back there. She wanted to have a man and a woman and a same-sex couple, but how the producers were at the time.
1990. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, everything in this scene, from the explanation of sexuality and then the joke with Riker at the end being kissed by Lal. So thoughts on this scene?
This, as a parent, man, this scene, because, you know, my kids are getting to the age where, you know, they're talking about, you know, that type of thing. And you're sitting there like, how do I explain this to my child? And you don't want to like, you don't want to go into full detail, but you also don't want to make it like foo-foo fluffy, blah, 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 you know, stupid baby words. So you want to, at least personally as a parent, I want to treat my child with the respect that, you know, that they're smart enough to understand, like, oh, you know, people are like, when people are in love, you know, they want to hold hands, you want to blah, blah, blah. And then at the end when Whoopi's like, and then where are they going? or when Law's like, where are they going? And Whoopi's like, you know, your dad can tell you about that. Like, that is the perfect like aunt moment where you're like, you know what? I'm going to leave the full sex talk to the parents. And it's such a good scene. And it's done so well because it feels like she's not just talking down to this person, right? She's, you know, explaining it like, this is what people do. And she's not dumbing it down for any reason. She's not using that silly foo-foo language that I know a lot of people do. And it's nice. And then, you know, just the obviously I said earlier that the kiss just made me laugh. Like that's hilarious. And Data's, what are your intentions with my daughter? Like that's just a great sequence in general. Yeah. But it's done with enough foresight for it to be like, this is what people should take away from it. Like they should realize that children are smart enough to, you know, that you can just like talk about it without it being like silly, and then leave the full sex talk to later.
Leave the full sex talk for when Data can say access.
You're not there yet.
Sexuality folder number 5.
Exactly.
Yeah, Guinan always gets saddled with that role of the bartender, and that people always come to her with their problems, and she has to kind of help them, guide them to their, you know, to the answer. But that's what Guinan does best, you know. She guides people in their own way to the answer that they were looking for all along. This, she gets to switch it up, you know. She's such a gentle hand with Lal. She's good at, like, you know, she's great at explaining things to her in that way. It's like she knows her audience, you know. And of course she does. She's thousands of years old and that. She's been around the block. I wonder if, you know, I always wondered if she ever encountered any other synthetic life and that and never just told anybody about it.
I would think so. I think Guinan's gone a lot further in the galaxy than anybody else has, because we've only explored like kind of like the one quadrant and a little bit of the next one. So she gone farther out. There's got to be more artificial life out there. That, I mean, are we really so arrogant to believe that the Federation is the only one that has ever made an artificial life form?
Yeah, right.
The Federation didn't even make one. That's true. It was Noonien Sung. Like, he was just, you know, just a wild man. He was out there on his own and he did this. I think it was why Starfleet is like so obsessed with getting a hold of like a Sung android. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like, you know, Guinan, I mean, like, her people, they must have been from the Delta Quadrant, right?
I would think so, because they were destroyed by the Borg. Yeah, so
a long time ago, according to her. So yeah, she has been around the quadrant, you know, and like more than probably any other character in the series at this point. But yeah, this is a great scene, watching her explain like affection and love to Lal. Watching Lal kind of, you know, basically sidestep a lot of it and just go straight for the kiss with Riker. I mean, the guy was just there like 5 minutes, you know. He just got back. He knew nothing about this. And then having Data walk in and with like, what are your intentions towards my daughter? Your daughter?
I can't.
Like this episode, you know, like the reason Halftel is in there is because like he needs to bring the heavy, because there is so much good stuff that happens, like, you know, feeling wise in this episode. It could easily kind of tip over, right? Yeah. Like this is just like, you know, a great little addition, that little comedic bit that you kind of needed in the middle of it.
And really from this point forward, they needed that levity, because afterwards it was just like devastation.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, you know, it's like, honestly, I watched this 35 years ago and the scene still gets to me in that his hands.
Yeah, I can't believe how I did this layout, because we go straight from this scene to the next one I really want to talk about is I want to talk about the ending, which I really should have figured out something to put in between.
Well,
So,
you got the levity before there, so it works.
That is true. Levity, and then going into this, because we were talking about some very serious issues about autonomy and rights, but we have to talk about the end of this episode. And literally, I cry every time I watch this episode. I not ugly crying, ugly crying. Mm-hmm. And I might start crying while we're talking about this now. So this is the moment where the episode reaches into my chest, pulls out my heart, and shows it to me, because we already talked about the scene where Lal has the panic attack when she's with Troy, but then when Data is actually, he's worked with her, and Haftel has said that there's nothing that can be done about her, and Data says goodbye to her. And it's just like this wonder on them being so close together. And it's amazing how emotional a scene with an unemotional character is, because also I do not believe that he is unemotional, because the way the scene goes. But then, of course, you do have the line. It's like, I will feel it for the both of us. So thoughts on this ending while I try to pull myself together, because I'm verklempt.
That's okay, because in my head, right before, while you were talking, I was like, Eric, don't cry. Don't cry in this moment. Don't cry, because this is like every parent's worst nightmare, is to have a child go before them. So like, it's sad already, but to see it happen again, like seeing it happen in this and again, in one shot, it was just heartbreaking. When my kids are scared or sad, they put their heads on my chest, or like when they're standing, they just sort of lean against you. And I know that happens for lots of kids. They might not want your arms around them or anything. They just want to have that closeness, and them being that close, even without touching, like totally invokes that. So already you get this like emotional space between these two people, and there's a sort of this sadness in Lal's eyes that you can see. Like, she's sort of staring off, right? And Data's just looking down on, not looking down on her, but he's looking at his child and trying to comfort this small child that's about to die. And he sort of he can't emote it as far as, he says, but you can see it happening through his eyes, through his motions. Oh my God, don't cry, Eric. And then, when she says that she loves him, and he goes, I wish I could, what does he say? I wish I could say that to you. I wish I could feel that too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he says. But there's this moment where he wants to say it to her. You can see he wants to say that to her because it would give her comfort. But he also doesn't want to lie to her.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like,
it's literally something he just can't do.
It's such a little movement of his face, of his eyes, of like this whole body presence. And then Lal saying, then I'll feel it for both. Oh my God. It's it's heartbreaking. And it's so sad because, me and Hawk have gone, like, we went to Mac in Hamilton, and that's where the big sick kids hospital is, right? So a lot of, I don't know if you did this, Hawk, but I did some volunteering, and you do some work with the sick kids hospital, right? So that there are parents that go through this all the time, and that this is exactly what like they would go through. We had the McDonald's house right beside our campus. Like, you would see parents going in and out of there, and like, it's devastating. So, the emotion and everything at the scene. Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Is just so well done. Oh, and then when she starts going backwards, I always wonder what it's like, right, at the end.
Yeah.
And when she starts going backwards and doing all the things she learned, like there are people that talk about when they go through and they think about everything that's happened to them. This is her going through all of that. And at least that's the way I took it. And it's just like, it's heartbreaking. And then Data it's just the end. And he's sort of frozen. And that's a nightmare. Like, man.
For me, it's thank you for my life, Father. Mm-hmm. That was the line. That's just absolutely devastating.
I forgot about that line. Thank you.
Sorry, Emcee.
No, me too. Oh, God. Yeah.
But yeah, both like Brent Spiner and Haley Todd in this scene would just absolutely kill it. You know, a father watching his child passing away right before his eyes. The way her brain was dying, you know, and it's like it was just like reverting back to basically her first memory, you know. I can't remember the sequence of it and how it goes. She mentions painting, and then the first word she mentioned.
I know the last one is family.
Mm-hmm. Family, right? Like I can't believe like Brent Spiner got through this scene without, you know, he probably broke down a few times and that, like, you know, this is bad, like, because he's, you know, in full makeup and contacts and that. I don't know how he got through this one.
No. Like mad props for him doing this oneer, right? Like this is a long scene for them to do. And for a first time director to do this too. Like, wow.
Yeah.
To trust your actor that way.
Julian in the chat did mention that Bev does say earlier that she doesn't believe for a second that Data doesn't feel anything for Lal, which I can't talk anymore about this scene because seriously, I'm tearing up right now.
No, Data absolutely does feel for Lal. We've talked about Data so much, like in previous episodes and this episode, and it's not that he doesn't feel emotions, it's that he feels them differently than everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Well, he says that, I can't remember what the exact line is, but it's something like, I couldn't bear for
her experience. So her life so touched me
that I had to save her. It's like, that's not something that somebody without emotion is going to say. Yeah. And it's such a great, anybody who has lost anybody would want to be able to do that. And so that Data was able to do that, to have Lal close to his heart, to his head forever, is just beautiful. And also that means that we've been debating whether or not Data can feel things, but at the very least, Data has the memory now of feeling things.
Enriched. Sorry. Gabe Prime on the chat said enriched. I was trying to find the word. That was the word. Enriched my life.
Yeah. Matt asks if this episode won any awards. I don't believe it did.
I'm just looking here. It doesn't say that it does. It shows up so much on, like, you know, top 25 episodes of Star Trek.
I actually do have some information about the reception to this episode, but I do know Michael Pillar really wanted to put this up for the Emmys, but they decided to put up yesterday's Enterprise instead. But he was really pushing for this one because he actually thought that this was the better episode. I'm not here to debate which one's the better episode.
So good, though, both of them.
They're both so good. Like, who do you really want to choose? And you said that they come like one after the other?
Yeah, Yesterday's Enterprise is the direct predecessor of this episode.
Man, this season slaps.
Yeah.
Let's clear the emotions. Matt was actually wondering if there's ever been a pod that's gotten this emotional.
Us, yes.
Not many pods are hosted by me, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm an emotional bitch, Matt.
The episode after this is Sins of the Father. So like 3 great episodes in a row.
But yes, gonna get into some behind the scenes now. So this is a landmark episode on 2 fronts. It's the first episode written by Renee Echevarria. which was done as a spec script. Echevarria would write 40 more Star Trek episodes after this. He was a story editor on TNG and a producer on Deep Space Nine, but probably the most famous, especially because we've already talked about him several times directing this. It was the first episode directed by Jonathan Frakes, which is why he only appears in one scene. He would go on to direct 28 more episodes. The 29th is coming out next season in Strange New Worlds, and 2 movies. He has directed more on Star Trek than any other actor. So thoughts on the debut of these 2 creators, and does this episode feel like a newbie endeavor?
I have to admit, I don't know the works of Renee Echevarria, which I feel bad about. But like, if this is their first like spec script, like this is a phenomenal episode in general. Like, that's amazing. As for a first time director, Jonathan Frakes did an amazing job. Like, everything's blocked well. The pacing is really good. I thought the shots that he chose, especially like choosing a one shot for that super emotional part at the end, like so many people would just, cut from one face to the next, to show the emotion. But having that and trusting your actors, like, this is an actor's director. Like, you can tell right away, like, he knows how to work with people because he's an actor. And for him to trust these, someone that he's been working with for 2 years, like Brent Spiner, and to know that he could go through this without having to cut away, like, that's amazing to trust someone that much. And then I don't know if he'd worked with Haley Todd prior to this, but like trusting those 2 actors in this very pivotal scene, like it's amazing. Like, you could tell why he's such a good director, and mad props. Like, he's just continued to do amazing things. And I'm glad that Jonathan Frakes is getting back into acting now. So I'm glad that he's, come full circle. So yeah.
So I've actually pulled up Renee Echevarria's Trek
resume.
Yes. So just a few episodes, because like I said, there's like 40 of them, but some other episodes: I, Borg, Ship in a Bottle. Let's see what else. Lower Decks. Over on Deep Space Nine, Past Tense Part 2, Explorers, which is one of my favorite episodes. Facets, Rejoined, Nor the Battle Strong, Trials and Tribulations, The Begotten, Children of Time, Statistical Possibilities, The Dogs of War. So like a bunch of episodes towards the end, because he was a producer on the show. But yeah, there's some real bangers in here.
Like, that's incredible. Like, just the list you gave was just like, man.
Hawk.
So Renee Echevarria, you see his name all over Star Trek. If you're watching from TNG on through, especially in DS9 and that, that name. You see it a million times in the credits. So I'm sorry I don't know his individual episodes, but like for a spec script, this was a spec script. It's beautiful. It's not easy to write about Data, in a lot of ways. It's very easy to, just kind of sway one way or another with Data, and that either kind of lean into how awkward he is with society and people and that, or else, just make him just too mechanical and that. This is like an episode that explores his, about his exploration of humanity, and his journey to try and be human in that. And in one of the most pivotal aspects of humanity, rearing children, creating life, and it's handled beautifully. And it's Jonathan Frakes' first time out directing, like, ever. This is his first episode. Like, you can see why they kept going back to the wild. First time out. One of their own. Like, they were a very tight cast. I remember like Diana Mulder and that saying, like, she always felt, season 2, she always felt very excluded by the rest of the cast and that, but like, that's how kind of tight they were. And to have one of their own in that, directing them, it must have been like an amazing situation.
And this was not only Jonathan Frakes' first time directing, it was the first time a Trek actor directed an episode. Now, obviously, by this point, we had Leonard Nimoy directing and we'd also had William Shatner directing. So we had two very, very different movies come out from directions by actors. But I think both of those are also very different than what Jonathan Frakes ended up doing on TNG, because it was a much more collaborative process. And I'm not trying to shade Leonard Nimoy. I might be trying to shade William Shatner.
Yeah.
As you should.
But yeah, there's definitely, I feel like, a lot more collaboration between Frakes and the cast in this. And it's wonderful. And now that I know, I mean, I knew that this was Jonathan Frakes' first episode, but now that I know that both of the people that created this episode went on to such illustrious careers in Star Trek, I'm even more glad that I picked this for my favorite episode.
I wonder what the script was like before Jonathan Frakes was chosen to direct this, because I wonder if he was in it more, right? And he just chose to be in it less.
Well, I don't know about Jonathan Frakes, but I do know that the original spec was obviously changed from the initial script. And it actually focused more on the Lal character. Like, the only complaint that they had about the original spec script was that basically the entire episode was from Lal's point of view, and the other cast members kind of only featured into her story. And so they had to change that around so that it was more our regular characters, which totally makes sense. But also I'd like to see that because I like the Lal character.
Same.
So a couple of more behind the scenes things before we close out. So there are some reactions from the creatives of Star Trek. This is a beloved episode to them. Jonathan Frakes called it the best sci-fi episode ever written. Granted, he is biased as fuck. So, but as we already said, he wasn't in this episode, and Michael Dorn ranks this and The Drumhead as his favorite episodes, which I think says a lot, because when you are ranking an episode that you don't appear in as one of your favorites, that means that you really like it. Because usually actors, it's like, I like an episode that gave me an acting challenge.
So true. So true.
As I said, Michael Piller had this as one of his 3 favorite episodes. The other 2 are The Inner Light and Measure of a Man, and he tried to get this nominated for an Emmy, but that did not work out. And Discovery's Mary Wiseman called it her favorite episode, saying it's just a gorgeous story about what it means to have a child and to be a parent. So I just thought it was really interesting that this episode ranks so highly amongst the people who make Star Trek. So why do we think this resonated with them? Is it any different than why it's my favorite?
I don't think so. Like, even like as I said earlier, I'm not a person that generally rewatches series over and over again, and this is an episode that has stuck in my brain for such a long time. So there's a reason for that. It's a good story. It's it's something that would resonate with basically anyone who watched it. And that's very apparent with everyone that has seen it. So yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Hawk?
Same. I mean, I watched this for the first time when I was like 14 years old. And there's been a lot of television I've watched that I've forgotten. I've forgotten like whole seasons and whole series. I've never forgotten this episode. That's how much it stuck out, in Star Trek. And that's not an easy thing, The fact that it resonates like 35 years later, we're finding new stuff in it, like, from the perspective we're at now. Could you have imagined feeling the same way about this episode you did when you were a kid?
Yeah.
It's like your perspective has changed. And that's what's so great about it, is this episode has matured over the years, in as far as data, as far as data episodes, I rank this has got to be in the top 3 as far as like the best data episodes of the series.
I would agree with that. I don't know exactly when I saw this one, but I was probably 7 or 8 when I first saw this episode. And by the ending of the episode, I was clinging to my mother so tightly. I don't know what it's like to watch this episode as a parent. I never will. I know what it's like to watch this episode as a child, and that's still buried deep inside of me and is still something that I react to. And this is still one of my favorite episodes. Obviously, that's why I picked it. I love Data, and this is one of Data's best episodes. I think it is probably his most emotional episode. I do like that Data never forgets Lal. In the episode with his mother, I can't remember the name of that episode.
Oh, yeah.
We actually get a painting of Lal that he made, which still bitter that painting never came back in, like, say, Picard, when they're having other paintings of Data's daughters. I can spit venom at Picard season 1 at any time, apparently.
I just want to add one thing. Like I said, I watched this with my kids. I watched it with my 2 youngest ones, mostly with my youngest one because my middle child kept on walking in and out. But it's funny watching them react to this because they take away a lot from it, and they're fairly small. They're 6 and 3, and Liara, my 6-year-old, I feel proud about this because she, at the beginning when she was sort of picking her gender and stuff, Liara was like, she doesn't really need to pick one. She's herself, right? Like, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God, you understand, you understand what, so many people have a hard time grasping. Like, they're just their person. They don't have to pick who they are.
Well, children always just see it for what it is.
It was, yeah. So I really do want to watch these older episodes with them. I feel like it's a good, I think it's time. It's time.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've actually done a really good job of covering final thoughts just in all of that. So let's get right into the mailbag. So, Eric, do you want to start with Dave Primes?
Nah, I don't want to talk about Dave Primes. No, yeah, I'll totally do Dave's. We love you, Dave. We love you. Thanks for staying in the chat. The Offspring is a roller coaster of emotions: love, warmth, compassion, heartbreak, but most of all, the humorous interaction when Lal planted that big old kiss on Riker, with the confusion on his face when Data advised she was his daughter. Definite highlight. Set phasers to fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, do not insult Dave, because thank you, Dave. You gave us a super chat.
Yeah, Dave.
Hawk, do you want to read Katie's?
Katie wrote, I adore this episode. There is so much emotion in it. From humor to heartbreak, it has it all. This is one of my favorite TNG episodes. It shows a side of Data that we all knew was there. Although brief, he was a fantastic father to Lal, and I reckon that when he got his emotion chip, he would have mourned her in some way, even though he transferred her memories and experiences into his matrix. I cry like a baby at the end, every single time. Kiss, kiss, kiss.
Okay, and I'll take JMC Treks. As the very first directorial credit for Jonathan Frakes, it's really a good episode. Seeing the journey that Lal takes from creation to death is both emotional, sometimes humorous, and heart-wrenching. Watching Data struggle to be a father and try and figure out what his role as one was a fantastic character development for him, especially seeing him in conflict with his duty to Starfleet when Admiral Haftel came to take Lal. The journeys of everyone involved was just fantastic to watch in the episode. And Eric, can you take Colin D?
Colin D wrote, I love this episode. That being said, it always stirs up my anger and makes me want to defend Data. He's a sentient being. Starfleet can't claim ownership over him since he's not an object. So what makes them think that they can claim it over his daughter? Please. Brent's performance here is superb. Frank's first job at direction is very well done. I hate so much that she dies, but that can never take away from how well this one was done by all involved.
Okay, and Hawk, can you take us home with NY Rawlights?
Yeah, NY Rawlite wrote, this is a great episode that also highlights the crappy way Starfleet treats artificial life forms. Admiral Haftel fits in with the mindset that we'll later see of holograms, not considered people, and it's okay to have a synth ban. Despite what Guinan says, I'm not sure how many bars Halfdel has been in. Nice.
I mean, he's a parent. Probably a bunch.
That's true. So that's it. We got through this with very few, with a few tears.
With the right amount of tears.
The right amount of tears.
Well, then he should have picked a sad episode.
We all of her episodes are sad, sort of, aren't they?
A lot of them are sad. A lot of them are sad. But thank you guys for coming. And be sure to come next week when we're actually going to be talking about another episode that's one of my favorites, but it is absolutely Giraffe's favorite episode because we're talking about, of course, we're getting into Romulans. We're going to talk about the Enterprise incident from the original series. So watch that episode so that you can come and enjoy us next week. So until then, for Hawk, for Eric, for me, have a good night.
Majram.
Live long and prosper.
Bye.
I don't do this a lot.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.